The record should reflect that the jury, as well as counsel and Mr. Burns, have returned to the courtroom. Mr. Seidel has resumed his seat on the witness chair, and we are ready to hear cross-examination. Mr. Spies, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Seidel.
Good afternoon, sir.
Mr. Seidel, you've given us a kind of a broad picture of your relationship with Ms. Martinko. In December of 1979, were you and she kind of comfortable with the status of your relationship, that is, you were going your separate ways?
Yes.
And you still continue to communicate, though, as friends? Is that a fair characterization of it?
I'd say that's accurate, yes.
You weren't upset with her, or she wasn't upset with you?
No.
Okay. So what I'd like to direct your attention to is the week before December 19th, okay? And I don't know if that rings any bells with you at this point, but I'm going to try to help you remember, okay? Were you feeling sick the week before December 19th?
There's no way I can recall that.
Okay. You remember back in 1981, at the early stages of this investigation, being interviewed by the then Linn County attorney, an assistant Linn County attorney, and a couple of investigators for the Cedar Rapids Police Department?
I vaguely remember that, yes.
Eugene Kopecky, Denver Diller, do those names ring a bell?
No.
All right. So if I were to show you what's called a transcript of your interview, would that help you remember?
Sure.
Okay. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Just take a minute to look at the cover sheet of this and see if that helps you remember what you may have been doing in this investigation back in March of 1981.
Well, I would have been in the Navy at that time.
All right? And do you remember being interviewed at the Linn County Courthouse in Cedar Rapids?
I think so, yes.
All right. And before you came into court here today, did you have a chance to look through this transcript?
I did.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you just a few questions about some of the things that you were asked back in 1981 and see if that helps you remember, all right?
Okay.
So in the course of being investigated and being questioned in 1981, were you asked about how you were feeling the week before December 19th? December 18th?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Did you tell the investigators at that time, in 1981, that you'd been suffering from the flu?
Is it in the document?
I can say that it is, yes.
I don't, I got to tell you, I don't remember. That's something that just is not sticking in my mind.
All right. So importantly, were you feeling well enough, though, on December 18th to go to the mall to do some Christmas shopping?
Yes.
And in fact, you went to the mall and you encountered Ms. Martinko there, just as you've told the men and women of the jury?
Yes.
All right. And in the week before that, did Ms. Martinko tell you that she said that someone had been watching her, following her out of the store that she was working in, and that she was worried about that?
I don't recall that.
Do you remember reading it in your preparation for your testimony today, reading the transcript?
I might have. Again, I didn't scrutinize the material that closely.
Let me show you page 38 of that transcript and the highlighted areas there. Take a minute to familiarize yourself with that and see if that helps you remember.
Yeah, maybe this is true.
So having looked at page 38 of the transcript of your interview in March of 1981, does it help you remember that Ms. Martinko was concerned about someone who had been watching her at Brooks, the store that she worked at?
mean, this is what it alludes to, but again, I don't remember that this particular thing might have been said in passing, and it didn't appear to really bother her in any way, maybe past an initial statement, right? Again, there was no alarm bells going off in my mind that she was under any threat.
So let me ask you this then, Mr. Seidel. Having read what you've read that's highlighted on page 38 of that transcript, are you saying that doesn't help you remember, or the statements that you gave under oath in March of 1981 was not accurate?
I guess it doesn't help me remember that much.
Having been recorded under oath in March of 1981, is that an accurate recollection of what you said back then?
I would say yes.
Okay. And tell us what you said back then about the concern that Ms. Martinko had that she told you, starting with the question and your answer starting at line 5.
Line 5. Did she ever tell you that anyone was ever watching her or following her out of Brooks where she was working? Yes, as a matter of fact, she did. She mentioned that there was someone that had been watching her out there. Did she describe the person? She said, yes, it was, the guy was
Excuse me,
grotesque.
sorry, I just want to interpose an objection for anything further than what the question that Mr. Spies asked is hearsay at this time.
Is past recollection recorded, Your Honor?
The objection will be overruled. You can proceed.
Okay, I'm at line.
She said what?
The guy was grotesquely ugly.
And did she seem intensely bothered by this?
She did seem intensely bothered during that week because she was quiet, really quiet, and did not have a whole lot to say to me during the week before her death.
Thank you. And she reported this concern to you about 4 days before she died?
That's what the document says.
That's what you said, right?
Yes.
And in the 4 days leading up to when you saw her at the Westdale Mall the day of her death, was she quiet during that week?
We didn't spend a lot of time together, so that's very difficult for me to say one way or the other, simply because the opportunities we had to actually get together were few and far between.
During that week beforehand?
During that week beforehand.
Was she still concerned enough about what she had told you that she didn't seem very happy when you saw her at the mall?
I don't understand the question.
Sure. I apologize for wording it awkwardly. When you saw her on the day that you went, on the night that you went shopping for a Christmas present, did she seem that she was still apprehensive or quiet about this concern that she had told you about 3 or 4 days earlier?
The idea behind the concern she had never surfaced, right? It was not a topic of discussion that occurred between us. So therefore, I can't assess what it is you're asking me in terms of, was it affecting her state of mind at the time?
Were you asked in March of 1981, Mr. Seidel, whether she seemed glad to see you at the mall when you went shopping for the Christmas present?
I don't remember that.
Would looking at the transcript of that interview help you remember?
Yes.
Page 43. I'm going to show you page 43 of your interview. And let's start with question line 23. Just read it to yourself, please.
Did she seem happy?
No, just read it to yourself. All right. And then following up on the bottom of the page, where you ask if she seemed worried. And then finally, were you asked whether she seemed happier than she'd been during the week before that you described, meaning the week that you described when she was concerned about this guy that had been watching her? And what did you tell the questioner in response to that?
Am I to respond now?
Yes,
I said no,
that she didn't seem happier.
that she didn't seem happier.
So we know that after Ms. Martinko's mother called you and asked if you had seen her or could, and eventually helped find her, when you were looking for Ms. Martinko and you said you went to Gatsby's, did this concern that she had told you about the week before enter into your mind when you were looking for her?
No, I could not make any correlation between the two.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have.
Redirect.
Just a couple things. Mr. Seidel, here in court today, did you remember what you had said in 1981 about what Michelle had said in 1979 before being shown that transcript?
No.
And then, I'm on, in the same area of the transcript that Mr. Spies showed you. Sorry, my microphone wasn't on. You were also asked back in 1981 if Michelle seemed to be worried about anything. Do you remember what you said in response to that? Or do you remember at the time if she seemed to be worried about anything?
I don't remember.
Okay. Would it help refresh your recollection if I were to show you the transcript where you were asked that question?
Yes.
Okay. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Page 43, line 25. So back in 1981, you were asked, seemed to be worried about anything in reference to Michelle. If you could just read this to yourself first. Do you remember what you said now, or does this help refresh your recollection?
It does.
In what it did? What was your answer at that time?
No, not in particular.
So when you were asked in 1981 whether she seemed to be worried about anything, is it your recollection at least, and consistent with your testimony, that she didn't seem to be worried about anything in particular back then?
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Any additional cross-examination?
Sure. Mr. Seidel, just further on, as you told the men and women of the jury and us, you were asked if she seemed happier than she had during the week before, and you said no. And then did you, were you also asked at page 44, you said that she acted like something was wrong, and your answer was she did, but that evening I was not really in much of a mood to talk, and I just didn't want to have that great of a recollection of how she actually was that evening because I wasn't really too talkative. Is that a fair summary of what you said in 1981 as well?
I'd say fair.
Thanks. Nothing else.
Anything further with Mr. Seidel, Mr. Maybanks?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Seidel. You may step down.
Thank you.
The state may call its next witness.
The state calls Kurt Thomas.
Good afternoon, Mr. Thomas. You're headed right over here to the witness chair. Mind the step. Before you sit, please pause and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Go ahead and be seated. Just a couple of rules that we have in the courtroom. We can't speak over one another, so please wait for the lawyers, to finish their questions before you begin your answer. And make sure that you focus on that microphone a little bit so that we can all hear your testimony. Please tell us your full name and spell your first and last names for the record.
My full name is Curtis Todd Thomas, C-U-R-T-I-S.
And your last name, please.
Thomas, T-H-O-M-A-S.
Thank you, sir. You may begin your examination, Mr. Maybanks.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Thomas. I'm Nick Maybanks. We've talked over Skype before, but never in person. Thanks for being here today. Can you tell us, first of all, how old you are?
I'm 57 years old.
And where do you currently live?
I'm in Bartlesville, Oklahoma.
What do you do in Bartlesville, Oklahoma?
I own 2 companies.
All right.
I have a fencing company and a dry ice blasting company.
And how long have you been a business owner?
Since 9/11, I was in aviation, and 9/11 kind of killed that industry, and
Oh.
I went into construction. I've just kind of been there.
Okay.
Governor, may we encourage the witness to move the microphone closer?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr. Thomas. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Maybanks.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sorry to talk over you. Okay, Mr. Thomas, tell us a little bit about yourself. First, where were you born and raised?
Newton, Iowa. And my dad graduated Ames very shortly after my birth, and we moved to Bettendorf. And I lived in Bettendorf till I was 6. Then we went to Peru. That's when the economy kind of took a turn. Then we moved to Galesburg, was there for a very short time. And I went to Cedar Rapids when I was in 6th grade.
Okay. And why did your family come to Cedar Rapids, if you recall, in 6th grade?
My dad got a job for Bush Hog Cross.
Did you start school then when you came to Cedar Rapids?
Yes, sir. I went to Franklin Middle School.
All right. Where were you living then on or about December of 1979, if you remember?
1516 Sierra Drive in Cedar Rapids.
And in Cedar Rapids, we always put the quadrant after our address, don't we? The side of town, right?
Yes, northeast.
Northeast, right. And being on the northeast side, in that area, is that why you ended up going to Franklin?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In the area where you live then, does that mean that you go to Kennedy High School or Washington High School?
I literally lived on the other side of the boundary.
Okay.
The kids on the cross the street went to Washington, and I was the only kid that went to Kennedy. So all of my friends that I had grown up with were going to Washington, and I found myself at Kennedy.
Oh, you had to go to Kennedy. So you had to make all new friends. And
Yeah, I didn't know anybody.
was that difficult?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Well, I want to ask you a little bit about that time period here. We're already talking about it. In December of 1979, so to the best of your recollection, how old were you?
I was 16.
And what class were you in, or what grade level were you in?
I was had just started my junior year at Washington High School. I had just transferred.
So you went to Kennedy for a couple years, and
Yes, sir.
then then you ended up going to Washington. All right. Were you working too?
Yes, sir.
Where were you working?
I was working at a store called the Chess King as Christmas help at the new mall.
And I remember Chess King, but can you tell us a little bit about what Chess King does, what their specialty is?
Specifically young men's clothes, jeans, shirts, and jackets. No shoes. It was young males, no more than 25, 30 years old would be out of there.
And I want to talk a little bit more about that time period, but just to fill in the gaps for us, you said you're out in Bartlesville. I'm having problems saying that. I'm sorry. What did you do in the interim period there between Cedar Rapids and Bartlesville? Did you move away?
I joined the Marines,
Okay.
and it took them almost 8 or 9 months to get me in because they were pretty full at the time.
Okay.
So I had joined and was just waiting, and spent a full tour in the Marines, got out. Then I worked for General Dynamics Electronics Corporation in San Diego, and then I went back into the Marines. They called, so I must honorably discharged twice.
Oh, great. Okay.
And I stayed out there. I owned Ambassador Limousine Company. Came to Oklahoma to learn how to fly a specific airplane. You have to get what's called a type certificate once a plane gets big enough, fast enough, heavy enough. And met my wife and wound up staying.
Okay. All right. Well, good. We filled in the gaps there.
Yeah.
So now that we know about you, I want to take you back to that 16-year-old Mr. Thomas, or
Okay.
maybe you went by Kurt at the time.
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about Kurt. At 16, did you know a person named Michelle Martinko then?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us about how you got to know her?
I got in some very, very minor trouble at school, I think being late or something, and I was going to have to go to detention. And a teacher named Mr. Irby that ran the theatrics, he gave me the option of going to be in the play. And so they put me in a technical aspect, was where I would go instead of going to detention.
Okay. You were punished by being put in the play?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just to clarify, is this when you're still at Kennedy?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you're a sophomore at Kennedy, and you got assigned to do some technical stuff in the play, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So tell us more then. Is that how you got to know Michelle?
Yes, sir. I was told what to do and taught what to do, and then it came rehearsal time. And so I was doing what I had done several times before, but all of a sudden it's the first rehearsal, and I'm standing just off stage in between curtains. So there's a curtain to the left and a curtain to the right, and I'm standing there waiting to do my thing, and boom, Michelle shows up.
Oh, really?
And she's standing right next to me, and it's just us, you know, and it was 5, 6, 10 minutes, you know, just standing there. And she had this incredible smile, and she just started talking to me. I think she could tell. I mean, she was a big girl. I was a sophomore. So she started chit-chatting with me and stuff like that. And that occurred 3 rehearsals and then probably 2 productions of the play. I remember standing there the first time she came out for dress rehearsal in the costume that she was going to wear, and her going out on stage, and then I can't remember what I did. It had something to do with changing over the set.
So after that encounter then, you became friendly with Michelle then?
No, I mean, I knew her. I would see her around at school, and then I saw her once out in Cedar Rapids. We were somewhere on the main strip. I can't remember what that street's called, First Avenue or whatever. And I believe I was at a pizza place. And I had switched schools.
Okay. So this is after the sophomore year, maybe
Yes.
into the summer or
So I
something?
didn't see Michelle after the
Okay.
play unless I saw her, but we didn't talk.
Did you talk to her like during the play then? Or, like while you
Yeah.
guys were?
Yeah, when we're waiting, I mean, we got more and more friendly every time. And then I switched schools over the summer to Washington. And when I ran into Michelle, she was like, "Where'd you go?"
Okay.
It was like I disappeared. And she invited me to a party.
Okay. And just to clarify, we heard a little bit about this alleged play. Is this Pippin?
Pippin.
Okay.
Yes, the play
Right.
was called Pippin.
Right. So you ran into her and you said you guys talked about a party?
Yes, sir. She invited me to a party. She was leaving the restaurant. I was coming in. Saw each other, and she just was like, "Hey, by the way, there's a party." Gave me the address. I had a hard time finding it. It was on a part of town I didn't know, more towards the northwest end of town.
Okay. All right. And so you ended up going out to that party that
Yes, I
night?
did. With a friend.
And you see her there?
Huh?
Did you see her there?
Yes, I did.
All right. I want to ask you just a little bit more about Michelle. When you saw her, I mean, did she always talk to you?
Yes, I mean, she always starts out with a big smile and a very friendly welcome. When I showed up at the party, I asked for her. And she came up smiling and greeted me.
So was that party sometime in the summer months then, or do you
No.
recall?
It was not a summer party.
Okay, all right, I didn't mean to put.
Because we had I had a coat on.
Was that during the school year then, after you had changed?
It was, yes, I was currently at Washington when I went. Because the person I was with, I don't remember who was from Washington.
So after that party, did you have a chance to run into her again at another occasion?
I ran into her on December 19th,
Okay. Let's talk about,
1979.
let's talk about December 19th, 1979. What were you doing that night?
I was working at the Chess King, and our store didn't have that much foot traffic. The boss had just let, her name was Kim, she let some people go early because standing around. And that's what I was doing. I was standing 6 inches out into the lane of the mall, just
Okay.
standing there waiting for a customer to come along. And Michelle walked up from the center of the mall, and I saw her at the time she saw me, but I didn't recognize her. I just saw a pretty girl walking, and then I got the smile.
Okay.
And when I could tell she was smiling and looking at me, it hit me, and I thought, oh, wow. And she was really dressed up.
What do you mean? What was she wearing? Do you remember?
She was wearing a calico rabbit fur coat and a high heels and a black dress, all decked out, hair done up. Her hair was always done up, though.
Okay. Did you interact with her then?
Oh, yes. She was smiling as she was walking up. She was like 2 stores down when she saw me, smiling the whole way, walking up. Then I started smiling, and I was like, hey. And, you know, I really don't think I knew her last name at that point. I mean, I knew her first name. It was like, Michelle, and it was all smiles and everything, but then somebody walked into the store. And I said, just a minute. And she's like, oh, okay. And I took care of the person briefly in the store. And she waited.
I want to show you a picture really quick here, Mr. Thomas, and see if you recognize the photograph. This is State's Exhibit 2G again. Mr. Thomas, is this a pretty good depiction of the way Michelle looked that night?
Yes.
And when you talked to Michelle, you said you asked for a break so you could.
I told her to wait a minute because I wanted to talk to her. I dealt with the customer, which didn't take very long. They weren't buying anything. And then I went back and I talked to her very briefly. And I said I was going to ask for a break. Would she wait for me? And she said yes.
Okay. What happened after that?
I walked into the back. My boss was doing some kind of admin thing with a bunch of papers. You remember the old green printer sheets with the tear-off sides?
Yeah.
She's going through all that. And I asked if I could take a break, that there was nothing going on, and she said, okay. She picked up her stuff and came out into the store. There was a island in the center of the store where the cash register was. And a customer came into the store right at that time, and Michelle had walked over to the right side of the store, and she was standing there waiting for me. And I walked up, I dealt with that customer real quick. I was worried that I hadn't locked up the coats. There was a coat rack there that had leather coats on it, and there was a cable that went through them, and I had waited on somebody, And the entire time I'm standing there thinking, I didn't lock the coats up.
Okay.
Or did I lock the coats up? And I remember at one point Michelle thought I was looking at her.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, is this guy standing there going to run off with one of the coats?
Okay.
And so I walked up to the guy, told my manager I was going to take a break, walked up to the guy, realized he wasn't doing anything. I realized that the coats were unlocked, locked them real quick, and then Michelle and I turned. When I say to the right, if you're in the store looking out to the front, the right would be your right hand. And we walked off that side, and I took a break with her.
Okay. Where'd you guys go?
We walked to whatever the big department store was on that side of the mall. We went up, and on the other side from where the Chess King was, we walked across that side. We went to the center of the mall, and I got something to eat.
You remember where you got something to eat?
I want to say it was an Orange Julius.
If you could, give us an idea of approximately what time you think this was where you took your break.
I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because I think of it in blocks of what happened over the night. I spent approximately 40 to 50 minutes with Michelle from the time I saw her to the time we said goodnight. And I want to say there was time enough for me to wait on 2 or 3 people before the mall closed.
And what time did the mall close back then, if you remember? Was it 10 o'clock close because of the holiday season?
I don't know that I can answer that question. It was the holidays, and I was a 16-year-old kid, and I knew what time I had to be at work, and they let me off work when they let me off work. And, I mean, I just didn't think about things in that frame of mind.
But it was toward the time of closing, you think?
I closed the mall.
Okay.
Yeah, I closed up with my manager and locked up the store and did the cash register, and then we left.
And that was after the 40 to 50-minute break you took with Michelle?
Yes. So I was there was some amount of time for me to wait on 3 or 4 people and then close the store. And I remember helping my manager pull down the thing that goes in front of the store, the wire mesh deal, and helping her lock that because I had to stand on it so she could turn the key.
Let's talk about what happened on the break with Michelle there while you're at the Orange Julius. Did she spend the whole time with you there on the break?
Yes.
Okay.
100% of the time.
And during that break, what observations, if any, did you make of her demeanor that night? How she was acting, basically?
Very friendly at first. Then I was asking her questions about the party that she'd invited me to, and she was just answering them. And then we talked about where I had gone, that I was at Washington. She said she was looking forward to graduating and going to Iowa State. And I told her, I said I was born in Ames, and my dad went there, and he's a little disappointed that I'm joining the Marines. Or at the time I was considering it. And she laughed about that and said she was looking forward to going there.
You said friendly at first. Did her demeanor change towards the end of your conversation? Or?
Well, our conversation started out chit-chatty. When we sat down with the food, the first thing I asked her was, what happened with that guy at the party?
Oh. Okay.
So it was a pretty pointed question, and she answered and said she wasn't dating him anymore and that she had dated another guy and he wasn't much better.
Okay. So she was talking about boy issues?
Yeah, not boy issues. It's just like I dated that guy, it didn't work out, and I dated another guy, and that really wasn't working out. And I couldn't figure out whether or not she was talking past, present, or whatever, but it wasn't enthusiastic.
Did she seem particularly bothered or concerned about either of these gentlemen?
No, dismissive.
What was her demeanor other than that? Did you detect anything else from her?
Well, I mean, when we started talking about the reason why I transferred and where I had gone and what I had been going on and doing, she was more uplifted then. I mean, now we were talking about something that was more pleasant than an ex-boyfriend.
Okay. Did you see anybody else you knew while you were talking to Michelle?
When shortly after we sat down and I was eating, I saw Blair Gaunt, and he was on the opposite side of the upper level of the mall. And Blair was black tie. I mean, he was really dressed up like he was going to an opera.
Okay.
And I noticed that, and I said, "Oh, there's Blair." And she immediately said, "Yeah, he was at the banquet, the choir banquet that she had said she had ditched from."
Okay. All right. So you saw at least one person that was dressed up at the mall that night?
That was the first one, sir.
And there were more people that you saw that were coming from the banquet?
We talked for some amount of time, and as we were sitting there, she was sitting to my left, her legs were crossed, and she was just sitting there, and then all of a sudden, a group of guys were walking on the upper level, and they too were dressed up and young, and I didn't know them, but they were all standing out. They were all overdressed for the mall because of what they had been at, and I looked, and as I was looking at them, Michelle just popped up and said, "Oh, it looks like it's either over or everybody's ditching."
Okay. So these are all people that have been at the concert choir banquet with her?
Yes.
Okay.
And she acknowledged that, that they were people that were over there too. And that's why she said they're either all ditching or it's over.
Now, what did you do then after the break with her at the Orange Julius? What did you guys do?
We were having a good, friendly conversation, but then I realized I was going to be late getting back from break. And so I told her that I had to go. We got up and went immediately downstairs from wherever we were upstairs. I don't remember walking anywhere. I just remember going downstairs. And that was at the center of the mall. And then we walked over to the side of the mall where the Chess King was, and we walked back to the store. And we were really engaged in conversation. And as I walked up to the mall, I expected to see nothing in my store because there was nothing when I left, and that was not the case.
Oh.
My manager was checking somebody out. There was 2 or 3 people waiting to be checked out, and there was 2 or 3 other sets of customers in the store looking at stuff. And my manager is just trying to check people out. So I instantly am thinking, oh, I got to get back into the store.
And were you late from your break, too?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
And, but Michelle said she was going to leave. And so we walked past the store, and we kept walking, and we turned to the first exit past my store, and we walked up to the door. And she said she was going to go, and I said I had to go, but we were talking like, don't be a stranger, And she started bundling up to go outside. And I turned to go into the back. There's a service hallway that runs behind all the stores. And when I would come into the mall, I would immediately go in that service thing, because that time card that we punched to go in and out of break and whatever, it was at that back end of the store. Okay. So I said goodbye to Michelle, and I turned and went in that door, and Michelle left the mall.
If we could here, Mr. Thomas, I have a map here, and I'd like you to just kind of retrace that for us so we have an idea of where you and Michelle were that night.
Okay.
Your Honor, can I do that really quick with the map?
You may.
Okay, Mr. Thomas, come on down here and join us, if you would. This is State's Exhibit 1A. It's been previously described as the Westdale Mall, approximately what it looked like in the year 1979 in December, as far as the interior layout. This is the lower level here. So can you first give us an idea where the chess king is? Should be marked.
Somewhere in this area.
And so in the white image here, you're down on kind of the beneath the T in the lower area here, right?
Somewhere in this area, just here, not over here or here, it was one of these stores in the
Okay.
middle.
And we have one marked here, Chess King. Does that seem about right, or is that maybe off of the store?
No, that could be it, yeah.
Oh, good, we got it right.
It was in
Okay.
the middle of that run. I don't remember exactly where, but it was in the middle of that run.
And so Chess King, is that where you were working then?
Yes, sir.
And is that where you first encountered Michelle?
Yes, she was walking from the center of the mall, and I was standing, if that's the Chess King, then I was standing in front of it to the left side. And she started walking up.
And then on your break, you said you went to the Orange Julius. So what direction would you have went for that?
We walked this way, and we went up, and then came down this side, and we were sitting on the upper level somewhere in this way, looking out over this center part of the mall.
This is 1B here. So right about in the middle there, is that Orange Julius was?
I don't remember exactly where Orange Julius was, I just know where we sat.
Okay, was it in that middle area there where you said?
It was right here.
Okay, all right.
Very specific about that, I remember it like it was yesterday.
Okay, and is that where you took your break with Michelle?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and after your break, can you kind of show us which direction you went with her?
Somehow we went immediately from here down.
We've heard prior testimony, there were some steps there, or maybe an escalator.
I don't remember, we just went down.
You
Because
jumped.
No. Somehow we went down, we were walking and talking, and at that point I didn't feel pressure to like get back. And so we were just walking and chit-chatting and talking and walked back towards the store. Now she at that point was telling me she was gonna leave the mall. And that's why we walked past my store, and that's why I continued with her past my store.
And let's go back downstairs. So you're with Michelle, and you said you're walking past your store. So which direction are you going now?
We're going this way, we walked past the store from left to right. Again, as you look out of it, and we went past it to the first exit, wherever that exit is, over here. So we walked over and went to the exit. There's only one exit there, because this is the way I came to work, and that's where I parked.
And so when you walk down here to this bottom area here by, it says Hans Jewelers, does that sound familiar?
I seem to remember a jewelry store. I don't remember it being Hands, but yeah, there was stores to the right of the Chess King.
And is that where you said your goodbyes to Michelle?
No, sir, I said my goodbyes at the door.
And show me where the door is.
Wherever the door is that exits the mall,
All right.
there's wasn't a tiny exit, it was a mall exit with several doors, double doors. And we were the only people. We walked right up to the door.
And she was preparing to leave at that time.
I was convinced she was leaving, thoroughly convinced.
What did you do as she was preparing to leave?
I was saying my goodbyes and like stay in touch and good to see you again. And
But at that point, the only thing that was on my mind was my manager was swamped back at the store and I needed to get back. So I'm trying to be polite, and she's standing there smiling, and she's getting ready to go out the door. And then I turned and went in the service door,
So
which was immediately behind me.
So can you say for sure you actually watched her leave, or just looked like she was leaving?
I did not see her put her hand on the door, but I was turning to go into the door, and I'm thoroughly confident that that's what she was going to do. Just, I mean, I can see it in my mind. She's smiling. She's going to leave, and I'm like, I got to go, I got to go.
And you went back to work?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead and have a seat, Mr. Thomas. Thank you. And as you said earlier, this final interaction took place right before you went back to work. Right before you went back to work, and then you finished up some business and closed.
Waited on
that.
several customers. Not, I mean, there was 3, 4 people. I think I also did a return. And that may have been a few minutes past whatever the mall closing time was, because some of the other stores were closing up, but we were still dealing with business. And when the last person left, we locked up the store, audited the register, and my boss started asking me about Michelle.
Oh, and she asked if that was a friend of yours, or?
She asked if she was my girlfriend.
And she wasn't your girlfriend, just a friend, right?
No, but my boss was like, who is that girl?
Okay.
And it was one of those, who is that girl?
Okay.
Like, and I said, that's a friend from school. I don't think I elaborated, and that just brought on more inquiry.
Okay.
She's cute, you know. and I was like, she's just a friend from school. And my boss, who's a female, was just like, she should be your girlfriend. She's pretty cute.
Okay, Mr. Thomas. I guess my last question for you is, you know, you've given us a lot of detail here today about your interaction with Michelle, and you, when you saw her, you believed she was leaving. How is it that you remember these events so clearly?
There's things in your life that happen that you just don't forget. And the next day, I didn't know what happened. And I was at school at Washington, and the principal walked in with 2 guys wearing suits, which immediately caught everybody in the class's attention. They asked my teacher something, and she pointed to me, and she called me up, the principal called me up front, and asked me to go out into the hallway with the 2 guys in the suits. And they identified themselves as detectives from the Cedar Rapids Police Department, and they said they wanted to talk to me about what I did last night. That they weren't any more specific than that. And I'm a kid talking to 2 guys in a suit. And so I'm just like, what? They asked me if I worked at the mall, when I worked at the mall, and they said, we need to talk to you down at the police department. And at that point, you're just like, whoa. But I still didn't know why.
And because of that experience, is that why you remember this so clearly?
Well, I went down to the police department, and they asked me a lot of questions about that night, and that tends to cement in your mind what you did. I remember it like it's all somewhat, there's huge blocks of it that I see so clearly in my mind. And it hasn't been colored. It hasn't been exaggerated at all. I remember that night. I remember Michelle, her smile. The goodbye smile. I mean, it's affected my entire life. You know, when they're talking to you about what happened, and you're focused on that, and then at some point, and I don't actually remember when, I realized it was about Michelle. And it just sucks the breath out of your lungs. And you're standing there, and just everything's going on. And I was at the police department. There was moments that they talked to me, and then long moments that they didn't. I just sat there. And surreal wasn't a word I knew back then, but, you know, you're just, wow. And I didn't feel stressed. You know, Michelle was not somebody that I knew really, really well. So for me, it's facts. Facts about what happened. I mean, I was getting ready for a job interview when the Space Challenger blew up. I remember it. You know, it's just something that you remember, certain things.
Thanks, Mr. Thomas. That's all I have for now.
Okay.
Mr. Spies, do you have cross-examination for Mr.
I do, Your Honor.
Thomas?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Thomas.
Good afternoon, sir.
Mr. Thomas, we appreciate your recollections of especially the evening leading up to your being spoken with by detectives the next day. You were interviewed by detectives that following day, and then about almost a year and a couple of months after that, you were interviewed again at the Linn County Courthouse. Do you remember that interview as well?
Not at all.
Were you interviewed by a county attorney who at the time was Eugene Kopecky?
I don't remember that meeting, sir.
Okay.
Honestly, I really don't.
If I were to show you a cover page of a transcribed interview under oath, would that help you remember?
It might, but I wouldn't deny it either. I'm not denying it didn't happen. I just don't remember that.
Okay. If I may approach, Your Honor.
You may.
Just take a moment to look at this cover sheet and see if by identifying the date, place, your name, the appearances, if that rings a bell.
No, sir, but I'm not going to deny it didn't happen. This was not something that was a pointed memory of me.
Okay. And a copy of this transcribed interview wasn't furnished to you in your preparation for your testimony today?
Not involving that. I got some stuff about the things that I said in 1986, and there were some notes that the detective took about that. I got a map of the mall.
So you were interviewed in 1996 as well?
1986.
Yeah, 1986. And did that occur at the Linn County Courthouse, as you recall?
No, it occurred at Topaz Electronics in San Diego, California.
Okay. So going back to the time when you were working at the Chess King, is it your memory that during that Christmas holiday season that the mall closed at about 10 o'clock?
I wouldn't argue that, but I would not say whether it closed at 8, 9, or 10, or 11. It was dark. I was working late. It was towards the end of the night.
Sure. Well, again, in respect to the interview that I just asked you about in 1981, on page 12 of that interview, the subject came up, and I don't know if this will help you remember, but you were asked about the time that the mall closed. And if you look at that and see if that helps you remember about the mall closing time at the Christmas season.
I mean, it makes sense.
That it closed at 10?
Yeah, that would make sense.
Okay. And when you saw Ms. Martinko leaving, or getting ready to leave the mall, would that have been about 15 minutes before mall closing?
I'd say that's a little shy. I'd say more like a half hour or more. Just in thinking about what I did after I saw Michelle to the time we closed the store.
So, but it was close to closing time?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And she was close to the door, as you just described for us, and this is the door that would have been close to this jewelry store?
I don't remember it being close to any store. I just remember it being an exit. And the stores were behind us.
Okay.
I don't remember there being a store to the left or the right as you proceed to the exit.
Did she specifically tell you that she'd been at this banquet beforehand?
Yes, sir. She told me she ditched from it.
And what do you mean by ditched?
That would be a term that we use to leave early or sneak out.
Did she tell you why she had left early?
Boring.
That the banquet was boring?
Very boring.
Did it?
She specifically said it.
I beg your pardon?
She specifically said it was boring.
Did she tell you that she was just killing time walking around the mall, or did she?
Yes, she did. When I first said, hey, what are you doing during that very initial part, she said, I ditched out of the banquet. There was something else said, and then she said, I just decided to come to the mall.
You closed the store, or did your manager close your store?
We closed the store.
And then what exit did you take to get out of the store?
The same exit I've been trying to tell everybody about.
All right. Did you have a car?
Yes, sir.
And when you went out to the car, was there frost in the car?
Oh, yes. It's a cold night.
Cold night?
Mm-hmm.
Was it a school night?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have for you.
Redirect to Mr. Maybanks.
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. You may step down. You're excused. The state may call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Sheryl Anders.
Good afternoon, Ms. Anders. You're headed over here to the chair with the red seat. Careful of the steps. Before you sit down, will you please pause and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, go ahead and be seated. Couple of rules I want to give you when you're in the courtroom and speaking. It's important that you allow the attorneys to finish the question before you begin your answer. I've asked them to give you the same courtesy to make sure that you're finished speaking before they begin asking their next question. All right?
Yes.
Okay. Please tell us your full name and spell your first and last names for the record.
Sheryl, Sheryl, Anders, Anders.
Thank you. You may proceed with your examination, Mr. Maybanks.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Sheryl.
Hi.
Okay, the first question I have for you is how old are you?
56.
All right. And where do you currently live? Excuse me.
Cedar Rapids,
Where are you working?
TLC.
What's that?
It's a telemarketing company.
How long you been there?
Almost 3 years.
Are you from the Cedar Rapids area
Yes.
originally?
Yes.
All right. Have you spent most of your life there?
Yes.
Where'd you go to high school?
Kennedy,
What year did you graduate from Kennedy?
82.
All right. So I want to take you back in time to December, specifically December 19th of 1979. You with me?
Yes.
Okay. So you said you graduated in 82. Could you tell us what grade you would have been in school at that time?
Senior.
Now, if you graduated in 82 and it's December of 79, would you have been younger than that?
Oh, you're talking about in December.
Yeah, December of 79.
I was a sophomore.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Sorry I asked a bad question. And how old were you?
15, about to be 16.
Did you have a job at that time?
Yeah, I worked at Leonardo's Pizza.
Did you know a fellow Kennedy student by the name of Michelle Martinko at that time?
Yes,
How did you know her?
just from choir. We weren't friends or anything, just from choir.
What do you remember about her?
Real pretty, blonde hair, and she had a rabbit fur coat that I wanted so bad.
Okay. And so you were in the choir with her? Did you do any other activities with her?
No,
Did you know Michelle well enough to recognize her by sight when you saw her?
oh, yes,
Did you have an opportunity to be at the Westdale Mall on December 19th, 1979?
yes.
Why were you there, if you recall?
I was just there hanging. I was getting ready to go buy some presents, and then I was standing outside smoking a cigarette, but
All right. So you weren't in the mall yet, but you were having a
Outside.
smoke. Okay. Do you remember about what time in the evening it was when you got there? Was it pretty late, or?
yeah, it was pretty late. I'd say be between 9 and 10, close to the closing time.
And we did hear just a little bit ago that closing time was around 10. So is that
Yeah.
what you recall?
Yeah.
And when you went to Westdale Mall on that night, what entrance did you prepare to go into?
I was by the catalog department,
Okay. For which store?
JCPenney's.
Okay. And so when you say catalog department, is that part of the entrance into JCPenney's?
Yes.
Is that an entrance that you usually used when you went to the Westdale Mall? or-
Yes.
Okay. And is that the entrance you were planning on using that night,
Yes.
after you finished your smoke?
Yes.
I'm going to have you come down to our map here and help us. I'm going to get it out here in a second. You can stay there for now. Can I go get that again, Your Honor?
You may.
Okay, come on down, Sheryl. This is State's Exhibit 1A we've used during this trial during today so far. That has a diagram of Westdale Mall as it appeared in 1979. You'll see at the top here is JCPenney area. And then the other department stores are Ward's, Von Maur, Yonkers. Now, with respect to JCPenney, can you give us your best estimate of approximately where the catalog area was? Where you were, I guess. Start with that.
Sorry, I didn't look this way. I think the catalog department is like right over in this area.
Okay. And over in this area over here, we've got kind of it looks like a driveway or maybe a place where the trucks pull in and whatnot. All right. And we're to the right of the JCPenney. And then you pointed, I think, to this area here, top right of the square part of JCPenney, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And so is that approximately where the JCPenney catalog
Yes.
entrance is?
Yes.
And is that where you were having your smoke?
Yes.
And so while you were having your cigarette there in that area, do you recall seeing anybody you knew?
Yeah, when I was looking towards the entranceway, because you know, this guy's standing there smoking, and there's lights all in there, and I seen Michelle coming out. There's a bunch of people with her, like, you know, because it's winter time, so, people are coming out the mall, but she was coming out. I believe this is isn't this, I think this is right, this is the catalog, this is the whatchamacallit, and I think right in this area is where the main doors are.
And so you're between JCPenney and Montgomery Ward's at this time, pointing to some doors here. Is it your understanding this was an exit door to the mall?
Yes, like a main entrance, like the main double door entrance.
And so did you see Michelle coming out of that area or in that area?
I seen her coming out the door and then walking towards the parking lot underneath all the lights there, but then I didn't see where she went after that. I went and put my cigarette out and went in.
Okay, so you mentioned before that there were several people. Did you see Michelle walking with people?
No, I don't know if they were with her or not, because, everybody was coming out the mall because it was getting ready to close, so I don't know, if anybody was with her per se.
When you saw her, could you associate her with anybody, or was she just walking as other people were leaving?
She was walking as other people were leaving. I didn't really associate anybody else standing there with her or walking with her.
How were you able to recognize it was her?
Because that fur coat, I'm telling you, I really like that fur coat, and I wanted to like it, and then her blonde hair, it's just, she just had a look about herself.
So you knew it was Michelle.
Yeah.
And she's coming out of this exit, like you said. Can you give us an idea, just generally, which direction you saw her walk before you finished your cigarette?
Towards this way. Right towards this way.
Could you tell just by looking at her what she was doing?
And she looked like she was walking fast. I don't know if it's because of the winter time or it's cold outside. I don't know. She looked like she was walking kind of like in a trot.
Okay. So she was heading out into the parking lot area?
Mhm.
Did you see anything else about her at that time?
I didn't see anything else, but that's when I went inside.
Did you say hi to her or wave or anything?
I didn't do any of that. I just went on in the store.
Okay, go ahead and have a seat, Ms. Andrews. Oh, yeah. So after you saw Michelle walking in that direction, then out of the Westdale Mall to the parking lot area, was that the last you saw of her that night?
Yes, sir.
As you were getting ready to go in the mall that night, did you see anything that indicated the mall was getting ready to be closed down for the night?
Yes, there was a couple stores in there that had their chains or whatever you call them, the little gates closing.
All right, so you could tell the mall was getting ready to close?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. That's all I have for now.
Thank you.
Cross-examination, Mr. Spees.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Hi.
Ms. Anders, you remember the concert choir, but you did not go to that concert banquet at the
No,
Sheraton
sir.
that night?
Oh, sir.
Okay. You went to the mall close to closing time, and I didn't quite hear, what were you intending to do at the mall that night?
I was going to buy some presents,
Okay.
Christmas presents.
And you went to the Penny's end of the mall,
Yes, sir.
there by the catalog entrance or by the catalog department?
Yes, sir.
All right. You saw Ms. Martinko coming out where you've described the men and women of the jury. It's your recollection that she was carrying a package or packages.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And was she carrying these packages like up against her chest or carrying under her arm? What do you remember?
I don't recall exactly how she was carrying them.
Do you know if they were in bags or?
They were in bags.
Okay. And it looked like she was in a hurry, as you said, kind of in a trot.
Yes, sir.
Cold that night, wasn't it?
Yes, sir. I'm sure it was. I mean, it's December.
All right. Thank you. That's all I have for you.
Redirect for Ms. Anders, Mr. Maybanks.
Cheryl, when you saw these bags, could you tell if it was bags or a purse or, could you tell
It
anything
looked
about?
it looked like a shopping bag.
Okay, all right. Did you remember anything else specific about it?
No.
All right, thank you.
Anything further for Ms. Anders?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anders. You're excused. You may step down. The state may call its next witness.
State calls Phoebe Smith, Your Honor.
You're headed right over to the red chair, Ms. Smith. Be careful of the stairs. Before you sit down, please pause and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead and be seated. Just a couple of rules I tell each of our witnesses. When you come into the courtroom, we have to speak a little bit differently.
Okay.
Namely, we have to be very careful not to speak on top of one another. When the attorneys ask you questions, you may know exactly where that question is going to end up, but I would ask you to allow them to stop speaking, take a deep breath, and then begin your answer.
All right.
Okay? Please tell us your full name and spell your first and last names for the record.
Okay. Phoebe D. Smith Porter. First name P as in Peter, Hoebe. Last name Porter, Porter.
Thank you, Ms. Porter. I called you Ms. Smith. I apologize
That's
for
all right.
getting your name wrong. All right. Mr. Maybanks, you may proceed with your examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Is it Miss Smith Porter then?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon. Can you tell us first, how old are you?
60.
And where do you currently live?
Jackson, Mississippi.
How long have you lived there?
28 years.
What do you do for a living?
I have just retired recently. I was working for a friend of mine who owned a collection agency, and I'm not needed anymore.
Okay.
So I'm at home.
All right.
Excuse me, Your Honor, maybe we encourage the witness to bring the microphone closer to her.
Okay, sorry,
Thank you, Ms. Smith Porter.
certainly.
All right, what did you do before that?
Before that, I was Director of Development for the Mississippi Symphony Orchestra for just over 11 years.
Right. Where are you from originally, Miss Smith Porter?
Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
All right. And were you living in Cedar Rapids, Iowa in December of 1979?
Yes.
How old would you have been in December of 1979? Putting you to the test.
Okay, I think I would have been maybe 19 or 20 years old.
And if you remember at that time, were you in school or were you working?
I was out of school for the time being, and I was working
Okay. Where were you working?
Pier 1 Imports at Westdale Mall.
Great. And we understand Westdale Mall was pretty new at that time.
Yes.
All right. And so how long had you been at Pier Imports since it opened?
Shortly after it opened.
All right.
Yes.
Did you have a position of responsibility there or?
Yes, I was assistant manager for the store.
And as assistant manager for the store, did that require you at times to be the person that closed the store?
Yes, most definitely.
All right. What were some of the duties that went along with closing the Pier 1 store?
You counted the till, closed out all of the books, made sure that all of the merchandise was restocked and put away and that sort of thing. Verified all the time cards, and you also took out the garbage. And you closed down the store, so you put the gate that was across the front of the store that led out into the mall area. That had to come down and be locked, and then you would exit through a service store.
Okay. All right. And so we heard some testimony earlier in this case that around December 19th of 1979, the date in question in this case, that the mall was closing around 10 o'clock for the Christmas season. Does that sound?
That sounds right.
Okay. All right. And this process that you just described involving closing down the store, how long does that take?
If I remember correctly, I was typically leaving there between 10:30 and 11, somewhere in that area.
Okay. On or about December 19th in 1979, did you know a person by the name of Michelle Martinko?
Yes, I did.
How did you know Michelle?
Michelle attended Kennedy High School and Harding Junior High with my younger sister, Catherine.
And did you know Michelle personally or just through your sister?
Mainly through my sister, not really a personal relationship. But I knew her to speak to her and wave and that sort of thing.
So you recognized her then, if you'd see her?
She was very recognizable,
Okay,
yes.
all right. Well, were you familiar with the vehicle that she drove at that time?
Yes, in fact, that was the one thing that really stood out in my mind about Michelle when I learned of this issue.
Yeah.
That's what I remembered.
Okay, all right. And so we're going to show you a photograph that's
Okay.
been previously introduced and received into evidence. It states Exhibit 4C. It's going to appear on that TV right behind you here in a moment. And do you recognize what's contained in this photograph?
Yes.
Does that look like the car that Michelle Martinko was known to drive on or about December 19th, 1979?
Yes, it does.
So were you closing the Pier 1 imports on that night?
Yes, I was.
All right. And you explained the process and how long that usually takes. Was it approximately the same process that you took that night, if you recall?
Pretty much. After you close down everything inside and you exit the building, I typically parked in the same place every time because I just kind of for safety purposes, and drop off the garbage, and then I would drive my car around to the, I believe it was the People's Bank that's in the perimeter of the mall. They had a building, and that's where I would drop off the money till.
And is that what you did on that night?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, can I get out the diagram one more time for today?
You may.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Smith-Porter, we have quite a large diagram here that's been received into evidence that states Exhibit 1A. This is Westdale Mall in 1979. Do you mind coming down here for us for a moment? And have you had an opportunity to view something like this then?
Yes.
Okay. And so what we'd like for you to do for us is show us kind of on this map your routine or what you did on the night of December 19th, 1979 when you left the mall.
Okay. I exited around, this is like a service area right here.
Okay, so,
Just speak up, just like-
yeah, no, have you speak up, I'm sorry, it's hard when there's,
Okay.
yeah. But down here is a service exit then, and that's
Right.
between Montgomery Wards and like the Osco area, is that right?
Yes, I could never tell what was on the back side of it, but when I exited, there was a dumpster right there in that little alcove, drop off the trash, and then I proceeded out this way.
Okay, so were you driving in your vehicle proceeding out this way?
No, I walked out there.
Okay.
I parked right in that area.
All right, so then, where do you think you parked generally?
This is kind of upside down from what I looked at before, but.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I want to say that I was right over in this area right here.
Okay,
I think that's about right.
and so when you walked, did you walk to your vehicle then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is that yes?
Yes, I was.
Okay, that's okay. And then what route would you take then for the next step in your routine?
Okay, then there was I would drive out, and usually I would come along this way or go out that drive alongside and go to the bank and go to the drop box. And the drop box it wasn't really you drove up, but you really actually had to get out of the car, unlock it, drop in your bag, and then get back in the car. And that was out there,
Okay.
and then
So when you were driving to make the bank deposit, do you remember seeing Michelle's car? Is that yes?
yes.
Okay. And obviously, we have a big marking here, but can you give us kind of an idea where you remember seeing her vehicle?
I just remember it was extremely cold, and I don't like the cold, so that, it's something I keep in my mind. But it was just kind of out there by itself, and judging by the time that I was leaving and knowing the few cars that were there in the parking lot, it just seemed out of place.
So was it in the vicinity here that's marked Michelle Martinko's parking spot where you
Yes.
saw it? Okay. And you said that stuck out to you because it seemed out of place for the time? And
Because anyone that actually worked in this area of the mall, or like myself, we all kind of parked, in close proximity to the buildings because we did leave at home.
And when you saw that vehicle, did that stand out to you as, oh, that's Michelle's?
I just remember that it looked like Michelle's car, Michelle's parents' car. But then I didn't think anything more about it until the next day.
And when you thought about the next day, did you decide to tell somebody that what you had seen?
Yes, I did.
Based upon your description of the amount of time it took to close and the mall closing at 10 o'clock, approximately what time do you think you would have seen Michelle's car?
I'm thinking this would have been, it would have had to have been sometime after 10:30, 11 o'clock. And I would say closer to 11.
Okay. All right, you can have a seat, Ms. Smith Porter, thank you. And when you realized at a later date that you had, when you realized that you had seen what you knew as Michelle's parents' car, did you report that to the police?
Yes, I did.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Spees, do you have cross-examination for
Very
Ms.
briefly, good
Porter
afternoon,
Smith?
ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Ma'am, when you saw the car that you just described for the men and women and the jury and for us, did you see anybody walking around that area?
No, I did not.
No other activity in that vicinity?
No.
You didn't see Michelle Martinko in the mall that night, though, did you?
I honestly don't remember that. I could have, but I don't recall it specifically, no.
Had you seen her around town before?
Oh, definitely.
And where had you seen her before?
She had been to our home. Are you speaking about that time frame, or at any time?
In that close time frame, sure.
I had seen her at the mall before. I had seen her just around town. Cedar Rapids is not that large, so.
Okay. Were there restaurants or nightclubs that she liked to frequent that you had seen her at?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And what were some of those?
I don't recall names of them, but let's see. There's one, I think it's Oscars.
Oscars?
I'm pretty sure that's it, yes.
And was Oscars a nightclub?
Yes, dancing and that sort of thing.
Had you ever seen her at a place called the Gin Mill?
I probably could have.
Or the Gatsby's?
Yes, probably there too.
Maid-Rite?
I don't think I went to the Maid-Rite much.
Okay.
Or at all.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're
No-
welcome.
No other questions.
Okay.
Redirect Mr. Maybanks.
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Porter Smith. You are excused. You may step down.
All right.
I would suggest at this time we recess until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Yes, we don't have any other witnesses here either.
Okay, perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, we will recess for today. I once again will remind you of the admonition to please keep an open mind, avoid any media coverage, and don't discuss this case amongst yourselves or with any of your loved ones who may be dying to know what you're doing during the day. You can't talk with them yet. So Please keep that in mind. We will keep your notepads safe and secure if you leave them on your chairs tonight, but we'll plan to see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.
Please add to the jury. You can leave your notebooks on the chair.
Counsel, is there anything we need to take up now or first thing in the morning that you're aware of?
Right now.
Okay. You'll think of something. Okay, very good. All right, we'll be adjourned. Or you're excused. We already are adjourned.